Where do humans come from? Where are we going? If there's a meta problem in everyone's life, then it would be my meta problem, which drives me to start making videos. In the past year, after consulting my history teacher and many students in history major, I found that they all mentioned a word, or an era. We call it the Exile Age. This era occurred around 700 to 300 BC. At that time, Confucius and Mencius in China, Sakyamuni in India, Zoroaster in Persia, Hebrew prophets, and Socrates in Greece. These great thinkers spewed out and swept away primitive ignorant state. And also, they laid down all the ideological traditions of the future human beings. If we understand the thoughts of these sages of the era, and how human beings have come to this era step by step from gathering and hunting, then we will have the key to thoroughly understand the essence of human civilization. And that's the purpose of today's video, which is the first episode of the series of Origins of Civilization. This series will adopt a three-part structure. In the first part, we'll discuss the true origin, meaning, and value of tools and languages. In the second part, we'll discuss the underlying reasons why the four ancient civilizations of mankind developed very different civilizational endowments between AD 6000 and AD 500, and how this laid the foundation for the Exile Age. In the last part, we'll discuss the continuation and virtual order created by all these important civilizations, and see how they profoundly shaped all humankind's thinking and the world order from now on. Today, we'll discuss the true origin, meaning, and value of tools and languages as the first part. Our story begins when humans start walking on two legs. It goes without saying that this is a major breakthrough. The legs free the hands, and the appearance of hands means the budding of tools. This is the common understanding we accept about the emergence of tools. In fact, it was the birth of another, larger, less known event that made the tools really appear. That was the unstable climate of northeastern Africa about 2.5 million years ago. At that time, the region changed from a monsoon climate to a period of long-term droughts and rainy cropland. The grasslands turned into deserts and swamps, and the once stable ecological environment collapsed abruptly. And all this happened not in millions of years, but in just a few thousand years. The scale of several thousand years is too short for the passive evolution of animals. No species has evolved the body in such short period of time to fully withstand this complex climate change, and thus active creation becomes the best way to survive. This is the true origin of tools. The tools that our hands make finally make up for our biological shortcomings, turning these perils into opportunities. However, these pyramids who build weapons, care for wounds, and control flames are not yet human, even though they have walked on three continents of Asia, Africa, and Europe. About 100,000 years ago, something happened. It led to a mass extinction event, and also gave birth to painting, music, and dance. This event is the birth of language. We should note that languages are not words, and many animals have unique words. Crows make sounds that correspond to various objects in their surroundings, and they can even create new sounds to represent certain new things. But these are merely words, not languages. The real language is actually formed with words and words, so it constitutes an infinite combination of meanings and causality, and we call it grammar. It is no longer words like apple, fire, or mother, but abstract words like nothing, because, many, and but. This is also the biggest difference between Homo sapiens and Neanderthals. It explains why Neanderthals, who also possessed a basic vocabulary and even more brains, ended up being defeated. to call language structuralism. As the name suggests, in their perspective, words have no meanings in themselves. Their meaning actually comes from the structure, from the relationship to other words. And this structure and relationship symbolize that human beings have entered a completely new era, an era of void creation. Grammar is the first new world created by human beings, a new world that has little to do with reality. From then on, language no longer has to be firmly linked to things in reality, but exists with itself as a unit, and with its own meaning. Since then, the first meme in world history has appeared. Through the meme of language, speakers of two languages can enter a totally new world, where people can interact, make contractions, express emotions, and even create things that don't exist at all. In fact, everything that happens in the language world is what the postmodernist philosopher Baudrillard called the simulacrum, which is a new system that simulates reality, but is also self-contained beyond reality. That's why I ended up dissatisfied with Baudrillard's strongly pessimistic theory. Baudrillard stubbornly believes that the appearance of the imaginary will eventually bring about the end of human nature. But he does not realize that human beings exist precisely because we can constantly redefine reality, transcend reality, and create reality. VR, or virtual reality, is nothing new. From the moment language appeared, we have been living in a self-woven virtual reality, constantly giving meaning to the behavior of various things in this world through language. This is actually the real function of language, to create a new world that does not exist, but allows everyone to enter together. A world symbolically maintained by the imagination of all. As Max Weber said, man is an animal crawling on a web of self-created meaning. In the symbolic interaction model of language, meaning does not exist in everyone, much less in the language itself. Meaning exists in an interactive network of human groups, and language and its users are the creators of this interactive network. Through this network, larger scale of social mobilization becomes possible. The awesome power that language gives us, however, brings up a question about change. In fact, any paradigm of thought and model of the world that binds us together must conform to a certain reality and cannot be a completely rambunctious imagination. However, the outside world is an unwieldy, ever-changing, vast unknown. To keep pace with it, we have to continually revise the model as new information comes in. But society as a whole cannot change its mind like a living being. It may behave like a social organism, but it has no brain. It exists only as a network of the symbolic interactions among its members. This network really changes, because it is impossible for the general public to change their minds at the same time. When we inhabit an imaginary world that we share with others, we still carry our unique messages, ideas, and beliefs. It may overlap with others on a large scale, but in essence, it is a product of personalization. It is composed of genes and all acquired experiences, and has a strong randomness. Thus, if some members of a society change their perceptions and beliefs while others do not, the patterns they share start to lose coherence. If the model becomes ambiguous, our ability to deal with a single overall environment would become weaker. The truth is that we cannot be disconnected from the physical world, but we also cannot be disconnected from the fictional world. And these two necessary conditions often contradict with each other. The tension between staying in touch with each other and with the outside world has been coded into human life from the moment language was born. The tensions continue to spark dramatic events. And this is why language, along with environment and tools, is the third thread of human history, and why it is impossible for virtual reality and simulacral worlds that completely decoupled from the reality to exist. Now let's go back to the day language appeared. Well, we don't know when that was. It's likely that humanity first had a sense of history. From that moment on, stories are conceived and we form a web of meaning with the people around us. Through constant communication, we build common assumptions, deep questions such as time and space, life and death, good and evil. We live and die in symbolic scenes of our minds, but it is actually not so real. It really formed a huge force of violence, helped us rule the world, carried out large-scale reproduction and hunting, and really helped us from social and emotional links with more strangers, so that we can share sorrow and joy. It is from then on that human beings can be called really human beings. And this is just the beginning. The ability to manufacture tools makes human beings more powerful, and the virtual world constructed by language allows human beings to form an imaginary community of a cross-border close kinship in a true sense. With these advantages, humans can expand into environments we previously thought were inhospitable. We can wear the hides of animals we kill, live in shelters we build from their bones, and go to these cold, uncomfortable places. About 40,000 years ago, we migrated from Africa to Southwest Asia, from there to Europe and East Asia, and then into frozen North. Circumstances determine what we do to survive, which in turn determines how we come together as a group, and therefore, environmental differences produce corresponding cultural differences. In the world's largest landmass, including Eurasia and Africa, environmental change has produced at least 3 distinct ways of life. About 10,000 years ago, some people gave up hunting and foraging, settled in fixed place, and became full-time farmers. In Asia Minor, Levant, and parts of Europe, small villages appeared. This happens only where the soil is fertile enough to get enough rain. The environment has led to the formation of agriculture as a way of life. But even in these areas, some people have chosen different survival strategies. Instead of settling down and betting their survival on agriculture, they domesticated the animal they hunted and become nomads. Farmers versus pastoral settlers versus nomads. This is a crucial disagreement. When pastoralists regularly trade with farmers, they may form a symbolic relationship. One side is good at producing grains, fruits, and vegetables, while the other side is good at producing meat, hides, and dairy products. Of course, sometimes, nomads also gather in villages and snatch what they want. In some areas, these tribes can even trace their ancestry back to common roots. Their rift could end up being an epic tale of betrayal and triumph in tribal mythology. The stories of Cain and Abel in the Old Testament, and the stories of Yan Huang and Zhi You in China all have this kind of mythological feel. The stories of Cain and Abel in the Old Testament and the stories of Yan Huang and Zhi You in China all have this kind of mythological feel. And the two local environments in which this story emerges both support agriculture and animal husbandry. So, these two ways of life are bound to collide. Eventually, along many lakes and seas, people began to sail and make a living in the water. This is not necessarily a late development. Research shows that prototypes for ships existed before humans. So from the very beginning, people found that, as long as they had right geographical conditions, they could survive just like farming and animal husbandry. And these people later becomes the archetypes of traders and merchants. After that, about 6,000 years ago, some people discovered a more productive agricultural environment than any region in the past. That is, the river valley. The river valley floods every year, and each flood deposits a fresh layer of fertile soil. There may be a lot of such rivers, however, 4 of them stand out most. The Nile, Euphrates, Indus, and Yellow rivers. These rivers each gave birth to Egyptian civilization, Mesopotamian civilization, Indian civilization, and Chinese civilization. So, the question is, if the environment eventually gave birth to civilization, then why are these civilizations born of rivers so different? The simple answer is that the 4 rivers are not exactly alike. In fact, they have key geographic differences. In these very different rivers, humans have formed different customs, traditions, ideas, and social structures, as well as different stories. These things have laid the most solid foundation for the upcoming exile age. Through knowing them, you can gain insight into the hidden genes dormant under the appearance of the 4 ancient civilizations in the world.